Hello everyone, this is Ola. Welcome to the very first part of the endocrine physiology. So first of all, let's discuss the types of glands that we have. Endocrine glands means glands without a duct, meaning that they produce their products, the hormones, directly to the bloodstream by exocytosis. And then the hormones are carried through the blood to the target cells that have specific receptors for those hormones. On the other hand, exocrine glands mean glands with a duct, like the sweat glands, for example. A mixed gland is the one that has both endocrine and exocrine components. For example, the pancreas is endocrine because it produces insulin, which is a hormone. And it is also exocrine because it produces enzymes for digestion through a duct. The testes and ovaries are both exocrine because they produce sperms or eggs through a duct system, and they are endocrine because they produce the sex hormones directly to the blood. The hormones and neurotransmitters both interact with a very specific receptor. So receptors that are very specific to the hormone or very specific to the neurotransmitters. And then as they interact with the receptors, they cause a change within the cell. A target cell is usually responsive to several different hormones. So the hormones can interact in different ways. They can be antagonistic to one another. So a hormone does the opposite action of another one. Synergistic, meaning they can add to one another to produce a strong effect. Permissive, when one hormone paves the way for another hormone to come and induce its action. So the synergistic effects happen when two or more hormones work together to produce a particular effect. This synergistic effect can be additive. For example, epinephrine and norepinephrine each affect the heart exactly the same way. So if both are there, their actions are added to one another. Also, the effect can be complementary when each hormone contributes to a different piece of the action. For example, to produce breast milk, three hormones are required. Estrogen, which stimulates the breast glands to develop. Then prolactin stimulates the mammary glands in the breast to produce milk. And then oxytocin leads to contraction of the mammary ducts so that the milk is ejected out from the breast. The permissive effect happens when one hormone makes the target cell more responsive to a second one. For example, in the menstrual cycle, in the first half of the cycle, estrogen hormone leads to changes in the uterus that makes the uterus responsive to progesterone, which comes in the second half of the menstrual cycle. The third way of interaction is antagonistic. So here, one hormone works in an opposite direction to the other. For example, insulin and glucagon are antagonistic. Insulin decreases the blood sugar and glucagon increases the blood sugar. On the adipose or fatty tissue, insulin stimulates storage of fat and glucagon does the opposite action. Let's do two important terminologies. Upregulation and down regulation. So in upregulation, the target cell increases the number of receptors specific to one hormone. So this makes the cells sensitive to that hormone. For example, during the childbirth, the uterus becomes more sensitive to oxytocin as it builds more receptors more receptors for oxytocin to stimulate. Also, physical exercise upregulates GLUT4 receptors. GLUT4 receptors are the insulin receptors that help the sugar or the glucose to enter our cells. So physical exercise helps with that. So here she's doing physical exercise. And if you look here, you will see that the GLUT4 receptors are inserted on the cell membrane, and then the glucose enters inside the cell membrane from the blood. That's why physical exercise is very important in diabetes, especially in diabetes type 2. Sometimes the people with mild diabetes are advised only for diet and exercise. As they do physical exercise, more GLUT receptors are going to be inserted and more glucose leaves the blood and enter these cells. So the blood glucose level decreases to normal. Opposite to upregulation, there is down regulation that we call also desensitization. So here the cells are building resistance to a certain hormone by decreasing the number of receptors responsible for that hormone. Testosterone receptors would be downregulated in response to anabolic steroids. So if somebody is taking anabolic steroids, then the receptors in the body will not respond enough to the internal testosterone, and this can lead to infertility. Also, in adipose cells, fat cells, in response to high concentration of insulin, downregulation happens. Suppose that you are consuming a lot of carbs, so insulin is released from the pancreas in a higher level. Prolonged exposure to that insulin as a result of consuming carb leads to insulin resistance. So the cells downregulate, decrease their receptors for insulin, and this can lead to diabetes. The hormones go to the blood directly through exocytosis, and they induce their action on target cells. In comparison to that, we have agents that we call autocrine and paracrine. The autocrine ones are produced by a certain cell, and they produce their action on the same cell. Paracrine ones, they are produced by a cell, and then they induce their action in the closed cells. For example, prostaglandins and leukotrienes act as paracrine and autocrine regulators. For example, in the stomach, prostaglandin is released, and it is released from this, and then it can work on the closed cells. So it is a paracrine agent. It's not a hormone because it's not released to the circulation. Now with some review questions. Endocrine glands secrete what hormones into the bloodstream, where they travel to specific sites that we call target organs. An upregulated cell has an increased number of receptors available for binding. What of a target cell happen in response to a prolonged increase in the level of hormone. Of course, this is down regulation, like exposure to anabolic steroids down regulate the testosterone receptors. So testosterone receptors would be down-regulated in response to anabolic steroid abuse. Two or more hormones work together to produce a result. This is a synergistic effect, like epinephrine and norepinephrine. One hormone inhibits the secretion and action of another hormone, so this is antagonistic effect. Calcitonin is the hormone that decreases blood calcium level, and parathermone is the hormone that increases blood calcium level. So they work in an opposite direction, so they are antagonistic. Insulin is the hormone that decreases blood glucose level, but glucagon increases blood glucose level. So they are antagonistic hormones as well. When a hormone enhances an organ's response to a second hormone, so it paves the way for a second hormone to work. So this is a permissive effect. Like estrogen in the first half of the menstrual cycle helps progesterone to work in the second half of the cycle. Chemical messengers that influence the activity of the same cell that releases them are auto means self, autocrine, while chemical messengers that influence the activity of other closed cells are paracrine.